Here is Soma Kisan. They are on the editorial board of our newspaper, Fight Racism, Fight Imperialism, which I have up here. Yeah. They are active in London with the Revolutionary Communist Group and played a leading role in the Rock Around the Blockades Brigade to Cuba in December 2023, which took over £2,000 worth of medical equipment to the Children's Pediatric Hospital in Havana. So over to you, Soma. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. And thank you so much for all the other comrades who've spoken before me. Very inspiring. And I want to start off by talking about what do Palestine, Cuba, and Venezuela have in common. They stand in the front trench of the global struggle against imperialism, against barbarism, against exploitation, and a world order based on imperialist plunder and parasitism. Today, as we gather in solidarity, it is imperative that we uphold the spirit of resistance that these nations embody and strengthen our resolve against the forces of oppression that seek to undermine the dignity and freedom of people across the globe. To understand imperialist aggression against these countries, it's useful to revisit the words of Fidel Castro from April 15th, 1961. He said, "What the imperialists cannot forgive is the dignity, the firmness, the courage, the ideological integrity, the spirit of sacrifice, and the revolutionary spirit of the Cuban people. This is what they cannot forgive, that we are here right under their very noses and that we have carried out a socialist revolution." In Cuba, as mentioned before, this imperialist aggression has taken many forms: invasions, assassination attempts, attempts at sabotage, acts of terrorism, disinformation campaigns, and most significantly, the 60-year US blockade of Cuba. The US blockade is an act of war contrived to bring about hunger, desperation, and overthrow of government, as conceived in a memorandum by then US Assistant Secretary of State Lester Mallory in 1960. It is an act of genocide under the Geneva Convention. Since 1962, this blockade has cost Cuba up to $160 billion in damages that have been felt deeply by the Cuban people as scarcities and shortages of food, fuel, and medicines make daily life exhausting. The Trump administration added 240 new sanctions and coercive measures to the blockade, even during the COVID-19 pandemic. Biden has added sanctions of his own. This sanction regime is also implemented extraterritorially. British and European banks collaborate with the US blockade. As we've learned through the 1 cent for Cuba campaign by the Rock Around the Blockade, none of us in Britain or Europe can send a transaction anywhere, even referencing Cuba, let alone trying to send money to Cuba. These banks automatically freeze and block these transactions at the beck and call of the US Office of Foreign Assets Control. Despite this, in every component of Cuba, one can see the evidence of the revolutionary spirit and commitment to socialism described by Castro in 1961. Even in the face of the suffocating blockade, Cuba's socialist mode of production ensures that the production and distribution of necessities like food, fuel, housing, and medical equipment are planned according to the needs of the people. A prime example is Cuba's healthcare system, which is both free and universal, a marvel of socialist commitment. At its heart is the Family Doctor and Nurse Program, where healthcare providers live within communities, ensuring care is preventative rather than merely reactionary. Cuba has more doctors per person than any other country in the world, despite being a developing country under the longest and most comprehensive blockade in history. Cuban internationalism in healthcare extends beyond its borders, with doctors serving in underdeveloped countries and training thousands of medical students from around the world, including Palestinians, at Cuba's Elam Medical School. This international spirit keeps the Cuban Revolution alive and thriving, a testament to a nation that prioritizes human need over profit. These achievements are exactly what the imperialist nations are terrified of, the evidence that a socialist system is the only route to true liberation and sovereignty for oppressed peoples. In Venezuela, the threat of a better world is expressed, as mentioned before, through the spirit of the Bolivarian Revolution, initiated by Hugo Chavez in 1998. Chavez learned through hard-fought experience that the struggle for social justice and sovereignty in Venezuela must be a struggle for socialism, that imperialism does not allow a middle ground where multinational profits are ensured by coups, destabilization, and paramilitaries. The Bolivarian Revolution transformed the nation by directing oil revenues into poverty-busting social programs and empowering the Venezuelan people through participatory democracy. Throughout this, Venezuela has faced a huge array of hostile imperialist strategies, including Britain's secretive collusion with coup attempts and failed maneuvers to set up a phony interim government, as well as British investment in offshore oil in disputed territory, stirring up hostility between Venezuela and Guyana, all for profit. Facing down these coups, mercenary attacks, and a blockade, Venezuela has remained steadfast in its commitment to the Bolivarian Revolution. Chavez's legacy of democracy, continued by Maduro, can be seen in working-class mobilization through the councils and communes, showing the world that building socialism can meet the 21st century's challenges. Moreover, despite severe sanctions and economic hardships, Venezuela has increased its economic independence, now producing 80% of its own food and fostering a non-oil export sector. This resilience is a beacon to the world, demonstrating that the imperialist agenda can be resisted through unity, innovation, and the unyielding spirit of a people committed to their sovereignty. Cuba and Venezuela continue to pave the path forward, shifting the balance of forces in the US's backyard, promoting South-South trade, mutual development, and setting up the anti-imperialist bloc for trade and development, known as ALBA. These actions have contributed to social movements taking power through elections in Bolivia, Ecuador, and Nicaragua, pushing forward progressive politics in those countries, opposing neoliberalism and imperialist exploitation. Even Mexico and Colombia have seen popular movements elect left-leaning governments. This solidarity and resilience is the reason why these countries continue to face imperialist warfare in all forms. Palestine, too, stands as a symbol of indomitable spirit in the face of overwhelming odds. The ongoing struggle against occupation, ethnic cleansing, and genocide perpetrated by Israel is a fight for basic human dignity and survival. Over 7 months have passed since October 7th, when Palestinian fighters broke out of their open-air prison in Gaza. Since then, the Israeli state has pursued a policy of systematic bombing and shooting of civilians and blocking essential aid convoys to Gaza, a policy of genocide. In the same time frame, it's continued to attack and kill Palestinians in the West Bank. Over 34,000 Palestinians have been murdered, with millions more threatened by impending famine as Israel continues its blockade. Despite this, the Palestinian masses remain unbowed, a resolute stand between imperialism and the spoils of the Middle East. Imperialist forces recognize that Gaza is Palestine's most committed, conscious center of popular resistance, a resistance that is a key bulwark of anti-imperialism in the Middle East. This same recognition of common cause is why Cuba and Venezuela continue to vociferously support Palestine. The U.S. blockade of Cuba and Venezuela has inflicted great suffering on the Cuban and Venezuelan people, just as the U.S. and British-backed Israeli blockade of Gaza has suffocated and condemned the Palestinian people to disease and famine. Beyond this, there is a deep understanding between these countries that oppressed peoples in Cuba, Venezuela, Palestine, and beyond face a common enemy, the same imperialist aggression. We have witnessed this recognition in Cuba's history of revolutionary solidarity with Palestine, training Palestinian fighters, giving medical education free of cost to hundreds of Palestinian students, and tirelessly advocating for the recognition of Palestinian statehood, exemplified through its refusal to recognize Israel as a state since 1979. Similarly, Venezuela has refused to recognize Israel since 2009, after Israel's Operation Cast Lead, which killed over 1,400 Palestinians in Gaza. Here in Britain, we see the same imperialist aggressors in both the Tory and Labour parties. Early in the genocide, on October 31st, 2023, Labour Party leader Keir Starmer gave a revealing speech attacking what he saw as the aims of the 7th of October resistance operation. The Palestinian Liberation Movement threatened Arab normalization, he said, and constituted a plan written in blood to isolate Israel from the West. Hidden within his words lie the real fears of the British ruling class, expressed through the Labour Party, that the Palestinian masses may force the undoing of the century-long collaboration between British imperialism and Zionism. This fear is the same fear that drives Britain's imperialist collaboration with the US blockade against Cuba and its continued theft of $1.8 billion in Venezuelan gold still criminally held in the Bank of England. Britain's support for Zionism has a long and deep history, beginning with the Balfour Declaration of 1917 and continued brutal suppression of Palestinian resistance, which set the scene for the Nakba of 1948 and the creation of the apartheid state of Israel. Britain's deep ties to Israel continue to exist in strength today, with military and economic collaborations and Israeli industries integrated deeply within British defense, cybersecurity, and academic sectors. With its deep entrenchment, it is clear that Britain remains firm in its mission to support Israel as a loyal base for its imperialist interests in the Middle East. All of this lays the context for our role as communists and socialists in Britain. The RCG's mission, as stated in our new pamphlet and British support for Zionism, Isolate the Israeli State. Our mission is to oppose any imperialist plans and to enforce the isolation of the Zionist state. We stand by the right of the Palestinian people to determine their own future. But while the Palestinian people directly confront the Zionist state, socialists and communists in Britain do not. Our principal enemy is the British imperialist state, and our task is to break its alliance with Zionism. This goal is the same as it is in the fight for socialist Cuba and the fight for Venezuela's Bolivarian revolution. In each of these struggles for communists in Britain, confronting British imperialism is our key contribution towards the liberation of the international working class and oppressed peoples globally. As anti-imperialists, anti-racist, and as socialists, it is our imperative to support movements and countries on the front lines of the anti-imperialist struggle. Their fight is not theirs alone, but is part of a broader battle for a just world order. We are inspired by their resistance and recognize our own duty to the struggle against our own ruling classes in the imperialist countries. One struggle, one fight. Isolate the Zionist state, sanctions now, end the blockade of Cuba, Viva Venezuela, and of course, free Palestine. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Soma. Thank you for all of the hard-hitting contributions tonight from all of the speakers. Zoom claps all around.